Hi, good evening and welcome to today's daily newspaper analysis, which is a part of our daily series, the Roznama by Clat Possible. So let's get into it without any further ado. As you all know, the top news each day is mostly about the war launched by the US and Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, in a significant piece of news over the last 1 or 2 days, the US and Israeli forces have actually struck an important oil facility of Iran. Okay. So, as you can see here, it mentions that Israel has struck Iran's gas field. Okay. In fact, the place which has been struck, it is shown on the map here, it's called South Pars. It is the largest known gas field in the world. Okay. That is what has been struck by the US and Israel. In fact, the United States has said that Israel conducted this attack without our knowledge. And Trump has even gone so far as to say that we will ensure that Israel does not fire at such infrastructure again. Okay. But what is important here, the name of the particular oil field that has been struck, the gas field that has been struck, which is South Pars, which is inside the Islamic Republic of Iran. And as I mentioned, it is the largest gas field in the world. Okay. Two other things are mentioned here. One is the funeral of Larijani. Okay. So if I can just show you, there was a profile in today's Indian Express as well on Ali Larijani. They describe him as a philosopher, negotiator, and hardliner. He was the secretary of Iran's National Security Council, right? He was essentially the person who led it, who conducted its affairs. In fact, originally when the JCPOA had been signed, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action between the P5+1 and Iran, it is he who had conducted the negotiations. So he was killed or assassinated in airstrikes conducted by US and Israel over the past few days, and which is why the article here mentions that his funeral has been held. He is one of the most senior and significant leaders who have been killed from the Iranian side. The other piece of news here is that US and Israeli strikes have managed to kill the intelligence chief of Iran. Okay. And what is his name? His name is Ismail Khatib. Okay. He was their Minister of Intelligence. All right. So those are the most important updates relating to Iran. Ali Larijani. Second, the killing of their Minister of Intelligence. And third, Israel striking Iran's and the world's largest gas field named South Pars. Okay. I hope this is absolutely clear. Of course, Iran retaliated and ended up attacking energy sites in the Gulf nations, which are its neighbors and which are largely allied with the United States. Okay. Moving forward, as you know, Israel has opened a new front of the war over the last week or 10 days by increasing its attacks in Lebanon, right? So please keep that in mind. Here, when Beirut is mentioned, we are talking about Lebanon. Now, what is one connection? One important connection is that Hezbollah, which is essentially allied to the Iranian state, the Islamic Republic of Iran, that is a very big military force inside of Lebanon. In fact, their allied political party even wins a lot of seats in the Lebanese parliament. So that is their link with Iran. The link is Hezbollah, which operates inside of Lebanon, which is basically allied with the state of Iran. Okay, so Israel has been conducting massive attacks. They've issued large-scale evacuation orders throughout Lebanon, just like they did in the Gaza Strip. So it's led to the displacement of millions of people as well. Okay, moving forward, an interesting sort of view by Shashi Tharoor where he says that India's silence on the West Asia war is not moral surrender, but responsible statecraft. So he's trying to argue that the fact that the government did not make a clear statement offering condolences on the assassination of the second supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and India condemning the attacks, the counter attacks by Iran on Gulf countries, but not condemning the attacks on Iran itself. Shashi Tharoor argues here that considering India's interests in that entire region, this sort of wait and watch policy of the government is what is responsible. It is not an example of moral surrender. So that's an interesting point of view. You can go ahead and read it in the Indian Express. Moving forward, another editorial piece which specifically references BRICS, or Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, right? Why is BRICS especially relevant this year? That's because India currently holds the chairpersonship of the BRICS grouping. And the BRICS summit in 2026 will be hosted by India, and it will be organized in India. Okay, so that is why the angle of BRICS is significant. This article calls for BRICS to take actions, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, to take actions in order to restrain both US and Israel. Now, I mentioned a few days back why it's a little bit complicated within the BRICS grouping, because Iran is a member. Not only that, Saudi Arabia is also a member, right? Which is one of the Gulf countries basically allied with the US. Okay, and even more so, even the UAE is a part of it. So this has caused huge complications in BRICS, and we may see some impact on the BRICS summit in India this year as well. Okay. Proceeding forward, now an interesting explained article in the Indian Express about why NATO does not have to answer Trump's call to join the Iran war. Now, this is obviously referring to the fact that Trump had called on its allies, especially NATO countries, to help it in securing the Strait of Hormuz and to ensure movement through the Strait of Hormuz. And the reactions were pretty uniform across the board. Most of the countries explicitly said that they do not want to get entangled in a foreign war. Trump, of course, was not happy about this. But what this article lays out is that Article 5 of the North Atlantic or Washington Treaty, North Atlantic Treaty or the Washington Treaty, does not require NATO countries to support the US. Why is that? Because Article 5 is about collective defense. That is to say, it is a military alliance. It does say an attack on one is an attack against all of the members. But even the North Atlantic Treaty or the Washington Treaty makes clear that it is only talking about situations of self-defense or defense of another country. That is to say, it's a recognition of the fact that in this case, it is the US which has initiated the war, not Iran. If Iran had attacked the United States, then Article 5 of NATO would be triggered, and it would lead to a situation where the other NATO members would be obliged under Article 5 to assist the United States and defend it against Iran. But in this case, it is the US which has begun the war, which is why most of the NATO allies have made clear that this war has nothing to do with NATO. We have not started it. We are not a part of it. Okay, I hope this is crystal clear. A few related points. You should know where NATO is headquartered. It is in Brussels, Belgium. Which treaty established NATO? The answer will be the Washington Treaty. When was it established? And that date today is observed as NATO Day. That is the 4th of April, 1949. And finally, of course, Article 5, which provides for collective defense. Okay. Moving forward, we now have the UCC bill of Gujarat. Now, we flagged for you over the last 1 or 2 days that the expert committee to draft the Uniform Civil Code for Gujarat had submitted its report to the government, and it had also submitted a draft bill. Now, the Gujarat government, it seems, has introduced that bill in the Legislative Assembly. Okay, so it seems this is on a fast track. We are going to have the second state this year after independence, which is going to have enacted a uniform civil code. As you know, a UCC is found in Article 44 of the Constitution. That is not to say that a UCC is compulsory. Article 44, which is part of Part 4 of the Constitution, that is the directive principles of state policy, merely provides policy guidance and puts a duty on the state to try to enact a uniform civil code for its citizens. Okay? As you know, the directive principles are not justiciable, meaning you or I cannot go to court in order to enforce them. But the state is, of course, free to enforce them, right? So here in this case, Gujarat formed this committee headed by Justice Ranjana Prakash Desai, who had also headed a similar committee for the state of Uttarakhand. They submitted their report and a draft bill, and the bill has been introduced. Okay. Now it is mostly on the same lines as Uttarakhand, so there is not much which is different, which is to say the problematic provisions about regulating live-in relationships and requiring registration of live-in relationships have also continued in the Gujarat bill. So let's keep an eye out for it. If it is passed, it will be big constitutional news. Moving forward, an interesting article today related to the NCERT book ban. It's a nice article if you want to read about the law related to freedom of speech and the law related to book bans, right? So I'm not going to rehash the entire controversy. I just wanted to flag this article for you so that you can go ahead and read it. You can find it in the Hindu in the editorial section. Now, I just wanted to flag this quickly. This is an article in the Hindu today talking about the World Trade Organization. Okay. Now, one thing to remember is the World Trade Organization is not a UN agency or body. Okay. The World Trade Organization is established separately, okay, through the Marrakesh Agreement, Marrakesh. The Marrakesh Agreement establishes the World Trade Organization. Now, why has this come in the news suddenly? Because in another week, the Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization is about to occur. That is why you see the name of this country. They are the hosts in Africa. Okay. So, the 14th Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization is going to take place in Yaoundé in Cameroon in Africa. Okay, Yaoundé, Yaoundé. Okay, so we won't go into further details right now because this is going to come up in a week. What do you have to remember? WTO established as a result of the Uruguay round of negotiations by the Marrakesh Agreement. Okay, and who is the current Director General of WTO, the first African Director General and the first female Director General of WTO? It is Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. And where is this year's 14th Ministerial Conference taking place? In a week from now, it is Yaoundé in Cameroon. Okay, so those are the details that I wanted to flag right now. Now, a very controversial thing has occurred where the Union government has introduced a bill to amend the Transgender Protection of Rights Act. And this is something that strikes at the core of the very definition of a transgender person. Now, as you all know, the generally accepted definition of a transgender person is that it is someone whose biological sex assigned at birth differs from their self-perceived gender identity. That is the definition of a transgender person. Now, what this new bill does is to delete the provision that says that a transgender person has a right to their self-perceived gender identity. This seems to strike at the very heart of the purpose of the Transgender Protection of Rights Act. And I'm not sure what the government is thinking here. In fact, it's become clear that they did not even consult the National Council for Transgender Persons. Okay, so it makes several other provisions, but I wanted to flag for you this very core thing, that it takes away the right of transgender persons to their self-perceived gender identity. Okay, so please keep that in mind. We will go into it in much more detail once and if this law actually passes. Okay, now an interesting article in today's The Hindu, which talks about national symbols and the laws relating to it. So I just wanted to flag this article for you and to remind you to check all of the important national symbols. Okay, for instance, I'm sure you already know the national animal and bird and things like that, but there are a few lesser known things like the national heritage animal of India. That, by the way, is an elephant. Okay, another lesser known one is the national calendar. Yes, we have a national calendar. It is the Shaka era calendar, SAKA, the Shaka era calendar. Okay, so I advise you to go back and revise once all of the important national symbols of India, including the emblem, the national bird, animal, the national heritage animal, the national tree, flower, and so on and so forth. Okay, moving forward, as you all know, there is currently a joint parliamentary committee examining simultaneous elections, or one nation, one election. Right? This is something that even came up in the latest Clat. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So this joint parliamentary committee has been examining it for a while. However, it needs more time. So the Lok Sabha has given it some more time to present its report. What do you need to remember about it? The chairperson of the JPC. The chairperson of the JPC is Mr. P.P. Chaudhary. Okay, so that is something important to keep in mind. Before this JPC, there was a high-level committee which had given recommendations on the subject, which was chaired by former President of India, Mr. Ram Nath Kovind. Okay, so I hope this is crystal clear. Finally, a new scheme launched by the government. Once again, there is an acronym. It's called Bhavya. Okay, or Bhavya, BHAVYA, the Bharat Audyogik Vikas Yojana. Audyogik means industrial. Okay, Bharat Audyogik Vikas Yojana. Okay, or Bhavya. This has been given an allocation of 33,660 crores in rupees. And what is the target? The target is to establish 100 industrial parks by the year 2032. In, of course, partnership between union, state governments, as well as the private sector. Okay. The last article which we have here is a call for the judiciary to introspect in relation to this entire affair over the book ban. So there are two articles today on this. I've already showed you one. This is the other one, and I wanted to end on this note because freedom of speech is not a right which should be played with either by the executive or by the legislature, or as in this case, by the judiciary, right? There is an NCERT textbook which was blanket banned by the Supreme Court of India for mentioning judicial corruption and a case backlog. So So what this article by Rekha Sharma does is to call for not only the NCERT to look within, but also the judiciary, right? To remember that it is the guardian of the freedom of speech and expression. All right. On that note, thank you all for joining. You can try out questions on today's editorials on the Roznama by Clat Possible. It's available on our website, www.clatpossible.com. If you click free material, you will find. All right. Thank you so much for joining this evening. Good night and goodbye.